everyone, Kate Berkner here today, not with Dr. Tom Phelan, but with special guest Kelly Rippon. Kelly is the author of a brand new parenting book called Parent Up, and there are a lot of connections and alignments between what she talks about and what we usually talk about here on 123 Magic, so I want to bring her on today and have a conversation. Kelly, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Kay.
Of course. So some of you may be thinking, Rippon. That name sounds really familiar. Why do I recognize it? Kelly, can you tell us why our viewers may recognize the last name of Rippon?
Well, I'll give you a hint. If you look over my shoulder, my oldest, I have six children. My oldest is a 2018 Olympic medalist,
Yes, so that would
Adam.
be Adam Rippon that we're talking about there. Um, and Kelly, I know that after the medal that's over your shoulder specifically, actually, can you tell us what that is? Because that is not the Olympic medal that Adam won. That's something different.
That's right. This is called the Order of Ecos Medallion. And I talk about it in my book. And actually, it was the influence that convinced me to write the book. During the Olympics, it's something that I did not know. All of the medalists receive two medals. One, they're awarded for their efforts, and the second, they are at a ceremony. They have the ability to give it and honor the person who has contributed the most influence to their success. Probably 95% of the time, it's awarded to the coach, and that other 5% or 4.99%, it's awarded to maybe a choreographer, a support coach, a trainer. But in this case, Adam awarded it to me. And I was the first parent who wasn't also the coach, because sometimes that happens where parents are also coaches. But I was the first parent that wasn't a coach to receive it. And it was shocking and overwhelming. And it really was the catalyst to start this whole process of what is influence. And he had shared with me things throughout the years that really not so much laid heavy, but kind of kept built resiliency and built that perseverance and developed character habits that formulated those necessary ingredients that you need to partner with talent, because talent alone won't really bring you that far. You really need to have those other character and habits that can partner with talent. So that's what that medal is all about.
Wonderful. So I do want to come back to this concept of influence, but first I thought that we would start by talking about kids and sports. Obviously, you are a parent who has experience with kids being involved in sports, and sports at an extremely high level. So,
Mhm.
I myself am a parent. My 12-year-old is involved in like a travel soccer
Mhm.
type of situation, and even that is a large time commitment, and that's
Mhm.
not on an Olympic level. So as parents think about their kids and sports, whether your child is 4 and starting to play park district soccer, or whether they're
Mhm.
a little bit older and trying to indicate to you that they want to do a lot
Mhm.
more of this and want to try to perform at a higher level. I guess the first question is like, how much is too much when it
Right.
comes to kids being involved in sports?
Well, I think as kids get older, they will tell you. Because I will tell you, Kay, I have yet to meet the Olympic parent who complains that they have to drag their kids out of bed to go to the rink, the track, the field, the gym. Usually it's the kids nudging the parents to get there 5 minutes early. So that is one behavior that you can observe. I would say for the most part, they tell you. Now, the enthusiasm of some parents on the rec level, because again, I have six kids, so not all of them were in that Olympic or elite level track. Some by choice. I did have a daughter, or have a daughter who was a skilled gymnast, and she made the choice not to increase the level of her training, to stay and pull back, and to be more of a recreational gymnast, and to use those skills so that she could apply them to cheerleading or she could apply them to general fitness. So that was her choice because luckily she saw an older brother of the different kind of life that you have to adapt to. And I don't like to say sacrifice because being able to do what you love, that something that you're great at, is not a sacrifice. It's a privilege. But she didn't want that privilege. So, but on that rec level, I remember when Adam was maybe 3 or 4, like feeling that pressure from my friends in the community, like you've got to sign them up for soccer. Like there's Wii soccer, and it's for kids that are like 3 years old. And then you have to sign them up for T-ball. And that's when they're like going into kindergarten. They're 5 years old. There's a lot of enthusiasm. And on those lower level sports, you have to really have a good eye of what is the objective? What is your expectation? And what is the objective? And they really need to align. Really at that age, it's about learning how to take turns. It's learning on, how to listen to authority other than your mom and dad. Because generally that coach at 3 or 4 or preschool teacher or mommy and me class or Gymboree, that's someone else giving instruction. And your child will be looking at you as if, do I have to listen to them? Or do I have your permission, to follow direction of someone else? So those are the things. What happens though, I think, many of the coaches at this level are volunteers. They're not skilled. And I think that, or they're limited in skills. They may have the ability to play the sport, but they don't have formal training on teaching the sport. So just like parents are learning as they go, many of the rec coaches are as well learning as they go. Many of them have their own children on the team. And sometimes they're much more comfortable being, offering harsh correction to their own child. And that can be intimidating when you're listening to your fellow teammate be berated by the coach who happens to be their mom or dad, so there are some difficulties with that. So too much is when your kids look like they're not having fun, when they don't want to go to practice for reasons that you can sense that it's not because their favorite TV show is on or that they are waiting for someone to come home from a visit or something like that. You can see that they're uncomfortable with a feeling that's generated by going.
Sure.
So
And
that's when you start asking questions.
yeah, and consistently not wanting to go. It's not, I didn't want to go last week, but I'm happy to go again this week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a really important also though to I think I say in the book that Adam was going to tennis lessons and he wanted to, like, he was talking all about tennis, and then into like the maybe 4th week he didn't really want to go anymore, and that was just because he lost interest. There was a valuable lesson there to be learned, not that he was going to be skilled at tennis, but he had to follow through. It was a safe environment. No one what there he wasn't being, he wasn't witnessing or experiencing anything that was uncomfortable. He just didn't want to go.
Sure.
But I said, you must finish your commitment and then you can make the choice. But you have to finish what you start. And that is how with the soccer, like now you said your daughter is on a travel.
One of my older sons. Yeah.
Sons. Okay. And so that's different because with the travel team, generally they're college coaches or skilled coaches, because they have a lot more expectation, and they're organized clubs where they're taking like concussion lessons, witnessing, safe sport, and all of those things. So it's a higher skilled. And now you're going to see the interest of, what his commitment is.
Yeah. So, kind of along those lines, as your child does start to get a little bit older and they've been very passionate about or very dedicated to a sport, if they are in sort of that, maybe park district or rec level, and they're asking to move up to, maybe a travel team, or they're asking to kind of take their training to the next level, how do you as a parent how do you recognize if your child has talent? And if they do, what do you do about that?
When they love this sport, but they start finding fault with the situation that they're in or the conditions that they're training in, maybe they'll start complaining about the coach, or maybe they'll start complaining about other teammates that aren't taking it seriously, or that somebody who brought their phone onto the field, or something that they are just completely appalled at, because you can see their level of their sincere commitment to it. They have more respect than what their fellow teammates. Then that it's important. But I always say, don't cut ties as you're advancing. Don't burn bridges with your rec team to go to the travel team, to go to the perhaps like that more professional AAA or single A, whatever the divisions are. Um, Make sure that you gradually graduate up to those levels, instead of we're getting out of here and then you just like call up the next, because you can develop a reputation that kind of bleeds onto your son or daughter, that it's more about you and wanting results versus wanting a fulfilling experience for your child.
Yeah. So, speaking of experiences, I think one
Mhm.
thing that a lot of folks have experienced in the last year is just the sort of the changes in the way that
Yes.
sports have been practiced, right? You
Yeah.
can't go to dance classes in person in a lot of places. And, while people it's February,
Yes.
I'm in the Chicago area. I know that you're also in a, a rather
We just got
snowy spot.
another foot of February yesterday, so
So outdoor sporting isn't
yeah.
really available right now. And a lot of coaches and teachers
Mhm.
switched over to doing Zoom classes
Mhm.
and Zoom lessons
Right.
during the pandemic. Is there value in paying for Zoom lessons, right? I know it's a conversation
Mhm.
that we have had, that I've heard other parents that I know have. Are Zoom lessons worth it?
Yes, and you know why I'm going to say that? I'm so glad you asked me that question, which I didn't know you were going to ask me that question, because I recently gave a few seminars on the value of changing up the instruction delivery. When kids are used to something like that's very hands-on and very kinesthetic, like say figure skating, because that's what I recently gave the seminars on, and ballet lessons. And the question was, is Zoom ballet really worth it? And the idea is, again, you have to go with expectation and objective. And the expectation is that you're putting your child, or you're signing your child up, or you're paying for a lesson from a trained instructor for informed feedback, so that they can practice not so much a three turn or a dribble on the soccer field. They're really practicing taking in information and being able to process that. And being able to process that uh, to do a mental replay is a valuable skill, especially if they're in more advanced, like at a college level or an elite high school level, state level, or world, Olympic, international level. It's important that they can do that mental replay practice in their head. And that's one more thing that they're learning. They're also learning um, to commit that time of focus in a different way. So that flexibility and delivery. Now, can someone become an elite figure skater or soccer player by only doing it online? No, there's going to have to be. But for this 18 months or so that there's going to have to be some adjustment, I would say we are really, the kids are not being cheated out of anything. They are being challenged, and they are being trained to be so dynamic and flexible in the way that they take in information, the way that they can assimilate it and then actually apply it to improving. So that's what they're really practicing, the art of improvement. That's what training is all about, being better.
And I think, all of the points that you're making, we were
Mhm.
talking about them in the context of, sort of sports, if you will.
Right.
But all of these things can be applied so
Hmm.
far outside of
Yeah.
sports, whether it's, schoolwork as we're young kids, or even social interactions with other kids, with adults, that type of thing, being able to take in feedback without feeling like that's damaging to your self-esteem, but rather feeling like that's something that's going to help you improve and grow in the future is a really valuable life skill to have.
My one daughter is a theater. She's a grad student, and they are actually putting on an incredible festival of, I don't know if it's 100 shows or 50 shows, but a lot of shows online all around the world. So I have seen some of the shows that she stage managed, and it's amazing how actors in different locations are able to come together in cells and create the scenery to like mimic each other. It's amazing. So even in artistry, even in things that are not so linear, like this is how you do, an axle jump. There's no generally one technique to do something like that, right? But in creative arts, it's exponential how many ways you can do something. So it's super interesting for me to see that, that dynamic assimilation of the challenge turned into art.
Yeah, very cool. So one of the things that you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation was about influence and the way that parents influence their kids. And, your book, Parent Up, is organized around 10 key influences. Can you tell us what those 10 key influences are?
They are optimism, our language, words, perspective, confidence, empathy, grace, loyalty, accountability, habits, and kindness.
Which is a long list, and
I'm counting as you're saying that to make sure I hit all 10. I don't know if I did it in order, but
and how did you settle on those 10 influences? Obviously, there are a lot of things that happen in our lives and a lot of things that influence us. How did you settle on those 10 as being so key?
I found that some of the characteristics say, oh, why isn't courage in there? Well, it overlaps. There are things that you need in order to develop courage. You need the flexibility of perspective, and you also need confidence. So I tried to make the strongest stones to travel. Yeah. And then I also interviewed my children because they're all adults now. So I have 5 in their 20s and one who keeps telling everyone he's 31. I don't know why he keeps doing that, because that would mean I'm much more than 31. And I did an interview with him the other day, and he must have said, well, now that it was with Kit Hoover, and he kept saying, well, now, Kit, that I'm 31, and I said, I've never known anyone so proud to be 31 in my entire life. And you know what? He must be a genius, because I just said he was 31 3 times already.
You did, at least.
Okay. But I asked them, and I think at the time when I was writing it, my youngest was 17, and he was still in high school, and my other daughter was just starting college. And I got a chance to interview them about different experiences that they had, what worked, what didn't work, what were some unresolved issues. And it was really, as a mom, you want to have those conversations, those crossword conversations with your kids that, Mom, remember, things that I might not have remembered. Remember the day that we were supposed to go to Knoebels, and then you said this, and well, I took it as this, but now that I look back, I can see what happened, right? So it's nice to have those conversations. And they shared stories with me that I include in the book that they were, felt comfortable in sharing publicly. So I incorporated those stories and I applied a corporate training technique, because that's what I had been doing for the last, few decades.
And tell us how many, then we'll know how old you are.
Yeah, well, I think it's easy to figure out with the math problem, but so I applied them, and because they would say, about the putting things down when you talk, because all of my kids have different learning styles, and that's one thing for sure that parents have to recognize. I don't believe there is such a thing as a parenting expert, because I feel like there's parenting resources and informed people that can share lots of ideas. But I definitely think that, you need to take the ideas that best apply to the situation that you're in, geographically, economically, socially, generationally, and with the learning style that your child is. Because some of my kids are very big picture, and they are multitasking, washing dishes, have an earphone in as they're talking with me. Some are very detail oriented, where they really cannot appreciate what I'm saying, or that it's being received, what they are saying to me, unless we have direct eye to eye contact with stillness around us. So once you understand that, then connecting with your kids is easier. And when you connect, you end up getting what you want. They end up happy, you end up less frustrated. So it's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so interesting that you pulled your corporate training background into
Mm-hmm.
this. One of the things that we talk about in 123 Magic frequently is for basically any job in the world, you get
Mm-hmm.
training, right? You
Mm-hmm.
get training to be a teacher, you get training to
Right.
be a law officer, you get training to be a medical professional, but there's no certification for being a parent. Like, you become a
No.
parent when you get a kid, and regardless of how that child comes into your life, whether you birth them or adopt them or foster
Right.
them, anything like that, marry into them, however that
Mm-hmm.
happens, that is the qualification for being a parent, is you have a child. And there's not really a formalized training around that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's so fascinating that one of the things that we do train on, leadership, so many of those principles really overlap and apply into
Mm-hmm.
parenting as well.
I think the idea is when people say, um, well, like you said, you're a trained lawyer, or you're a trained police officer, or a trained, banquet server, or scheduler. Those are because they're jobs. But being a parent isn't a job, it's a privilege. And you can either be very good at it, show up for it, or ignore your responsibility for it. So every day we have a choice, and so I've been in all three of those categories.
As we all
So
have, yeah, I
yeah,
think.
and because we have to, it is a complete immersion. It is not something that you can turn on and off. And I have some of the most dedicated parents that I have ever met are parents that have taken tragedy of losing a child and taking the memory or the essence of what they believe the character of that child was, and bringing it forward into a foundation or something like that, and working to help other children around the world. So a parent is something you become. Like you said, you marry, and become a parent by default, or by choice, I should say. Adopt, foster parents, you actually birth a child. I mean, there's multiple ways of moving into that parent category, but we decide every day how much, like if we're at that carnival and you're hitting the marker goes up to, we decide how much energy that we're going to apply to that privilege every day.
Absolutely. Um, so one of the things that has always struck me in talking with you,
Mm-hmm.
and in watching you talk with your kids, is that your kids are grown up now and they like you. They
Mm-hmm.
genuinely like you and enjoy interacting with you, and they like each other. And
Mm-hmm.
to have 6 kids and have raised them as a single parent, sibling rivalry is another thing that we talk
Right.
about a lot on 123 Magic. And obviously you're past the point of very young children beating up on each other for a stuffed animal or something. But
Right.
would love to know if you have any tips or advice for our parents on how you raise kids who end up liking each other and end up being
Mm-hmm.
close.
Um, My I grew up in a big family. So I'm one of seven. And we were spread over 17 years. So it's a little bit different because mine are under 11 years, like 10 plus years, six in 10 years. So they're much closer in age. The one thing that I can say is I never forced them to like each other. I never forced them. It was not a rule. We had a rule that we had to treat people with respect. We didn't have to treat family members with respect. We had to treat human beings with respect. And we just all happened to be human beings, luckily, right? I never dragged them all to go watch their sister at gymnastics. I never gathered them all together and made them watch their brother take a skating lesson. And you know what? It's a pain. It is it is it creates more work because it's so much easier if you just say grab your DS and jump in the car. I mean, we had DS. I don't know what kids have these days, but uh bring your whatever and jump in the car and we're going to go to the rink. I had to find uh, either an activity that would occupy them or as the kids got older, an older child to watch the brothers and sisters or a relative or someone, so that I didn't make them root for each other. All of that. And, as they got older and they started graduating high school and college and law school, they moved, and the Olympics. Like two of my kids moved mountains to get to Korea to root for their brother. So, and to go root for him when he was on Dancing with the Stars. So, I mean, there are, it's a slow process, but when you force it, it's like an arranged marriage. Sometimes it will work. There are people that said, well, that in our house, we just had to do that. Well, sometimes you do have compliant kids that are on the same channel, of those learning styles and the messaging communication styles. And sometimes you luck out that happens. But especially when you have lots of kids or if you have multiple kids, twins or triplets, that have perhaps different interests. If two of your triplets like tennis and that third doesn't like tennis, but they're forced because majority rules, you really need to have an individual tailored society. But I never made them root for each other so that eventually when they wanted to go to somebody's track meet or they wanted to go to a high school lacrosse game, my daughter played lacrosse, it was because they wanted to.
Yeah, so not forcing involvement, which probably helps with not causing resentment between siblings. Like, ugh, I
Right.
have to go to your baseball game again.
Right.
And then I'm sure that when a sibling did want to attend, whether it was a sports game or a performance
Hmm.
or something like that, there was sort of this like very genuine happiness
Right.
from everyone involved. And
Right.
that's a great positive feedback loop created because the child who's performing knows that everyone who's there is there because they genuinely want to be, not because mom made them all come, and mom's happy because the kids are supporting each other, and the kid who's there is there because they want to be. So like I said, really great positive feedback loop created
And
there.
don't compare the kids to each other
Yeah.
because sometimes you'll have a child that loved Mrs. Connors as the English teacher. They thought everything was, I just loved her. And then you have another child who I'm bored out of my mind and I can barely pull a C and I'm an A student. It's really because of the communication style. That not everybody's going to like broccoli. Not everyone's going to like tuna fish. Like there are going to be things that some of your kids gravitate toward and some don't. And just because perhaps one or two or the ones that don't doesn't mean that they are defective or deficient or less of anything. It's just that it's just not their style.
Yeah. So not comparing, not forcing, and teaching
Right.
respect for other humans. I like
Yeah.
that a lot. So Kelly, if you could leave parents with one thing, sort of like
Mhm.
key point when it comes to raising kids, what would it be?
Don't be afraid to, and I got this advice actually from my third, who I claim is my favorite. Um, don't be afraid if they're mad at you. They're going to be mad at you. They're not your friend. You're their parent. So don't be afraid. It's a horrible feeling, especially when they're in high school and they have privacy and you want to know what's going on and you want to know what's going on with their friends and or they're in college. Those are those transitional times where they are practicing adulthood. You are always going to be their mom or dad forever. Like that title cannot be taken away. The only way it can be taken away is if you relinquish it and demote yourself to friend. So I would say there's plenty of time to be friendly with your kids when they're adults. And you can see, you've seen me interact with some of my kids. It's a lot of fun when they have that confidence and they're engaged in professions and they can have that fun and playfulness. But there's always that time where they need a mom, even though we're super friendly with each other and I love their company. I'm always going to be their mom. So
Wonderful.
Don't worry if they're mad at you. They'll get over it. And so will you. I know that feeling like I need to fix this. I need to apologize. What did I do wrong?
Nothing. You parented.
That's right.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Kelly, for joining us today.